The race for the White House is heating up, and the outcome of the 2020 U.S. general election will have an impact around the world. In the coming months, we'll find out who has won over enough voters in the midst of a pandemic to clinch the presidency, as President Donald Trump, the Republican nominee, and Joe Biden, the Democratic nominee, go head-to-head. As the race heats up, we saw just a few hours ago that U.S. President Donald Trump has nominated Amy Coney Barrett to be the U.S. new Supreme Court Justice, replacing Liberal Justice Ruth Ginsburg, who died recently, aged 87. Ginsburg, to be exact. To give an overview of what we can expect in the coming months is Dr. Sithembile Mbete, lecturer in the Department of Political Sciences at the University of Pretoria. Thank you, Dr. Sithembile, for joining us. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. Now, the appointment in the USA of Donald Trump appointing Judge Amy Coney Barrett, what does that actually mean for the U.S., considering that Dr. Amy Coney Barrett is an ally of Donald Trump?
So basically what he's done with the appointment of Amy Coney Barrett is to nominate her for the seat that has been left vacant by Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death. And what the process is from now is that on October 12th, I think is the date that they've set, there will now be confirmation hearings. So she will be interviewed and go through a whole interrogation process basically by the U.S. Senate. And then it is going to be the senators that are going to vote on whether or not she will be confirmed as the candidate to take over that seat in the Supreme Court. And the reason why this is important is because it is highly likely that this election is going to the result of this election is going to be contested and is going to have to be decided on in the Supreme Court. And at the current moment, there are 8 Supreme Court judges. There usually would be 9. And so there's a feeling amongst the Republicans that you need to have a full bench of the Supreme Court, all 9 judges, in order to be able to make a decision on the election. Of course, in 2016, the Supreme Court also only had 8 judges, and the Republicans blocked Barack Obama's candidate and nomination for the vacant seat, and that seat was then eventually filled by Donald Trump the following year. And so really this is part now of a bigger contestation between the Democrats and the Republicans.
Let's chat a little more about Judge Amy Coney Barrett, and looking at her being a staunch Catholic. She's been quite open with that. How will that play out with non-Christian Americans?
So the thing about her being a staunch Catholic, she's also as weird as it sounds, a contradiction in terms, she's an evangelical Catholic, and so is very much in line with the evangelical Christians that are supporters of President Donald Trump. She is also what is labeled an originalist, which basically means that she advocates a text-based understanding of the U.S. Constitution and advocates a position of interpreting the Constitution as the original drafters meant for the Constitution to be interpreted. She doesn't believe in the idea of a living Constitution. And so what that means is that she takes a literal view of the Constitution's stipulations on gun control, for example, or on gun ownership. So she is very staunchly opposed to the control of gun ownership. She takes a literal view of what the Constitution says about rights to life. So she does not believe in abortion rights and would want to overturn Roe versus Wade, which is the judgment on which abortion was legalized in the United States. She also is an opponent of the Affordable Health Care Act, which is become known as the Obamacare Act, and she would would be very likely to overturn the different stipulations of Obamacare and want to get rid of that. And so in that way, she really is ideologically and politically very strongly aligned to President Trump.
Let's move things away from her for a moment and talk about the black voter in the USA, considering that many shootings have taken place at the hands of police of unarmed men and women in the US. How do you think the mindset will be for black voters when they head to the polls in about 40 days' time?
Well, look, I think that when we talk about black voters in the United States, we firstly have to recognize that in many Republican-run states, there has been a concerted effort to block to suppress the black vote through all sorts of measures around identification, blocking people with any felonies from voting, and other measures really to make it very difficult for black people to turn out to vote. And we've seen that trend in the United States over the past 20 years. And so there's already a structural systemic barrier for black people to turn out to vote. But when people do turn out to vote, black people, particularly black women, have been the most consistent voters of the Democratic Party since the civil rights era, when black people could vote. And so for the Democrats, the black women's vote is particularly important, especially the vote of older women. And so that would be one of the reasons why Joe Biden chose as his running mate Kamala Harris, because she is an older black woman and has quite a great base, can bring out the base of the Democratic Party to vote. The big challenge, of course, about Kamala Harris is that she is considered as somebody who is actually aligned with the law enforcement agencies. She was the state attorney of California. She was district attorney of San Francisco. And in that capacity, took a very hard-on crime stance and was very much a lock them up type of jurist. And this really goes against the trend that we're seeing now in the US around calls to defund the police and calls to have greater control over the over law enforcement because of these killings that you've mentioned of black men and women unlawfully by the police. And so there is a lot of skepticism about Harris from the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, and particularly those that have been proponents of Black Lives Matter. But a big thing that is taking place at the moment is that even the big stalwarts of the progressive movement in the Democratic Party, people like Cornel West, are saying that, look, just vote for Biden and Harris because it'll be easier for us to influence them than it will be for us to influence Donald Trump. And there's a big move to really vote against Donald Trump and his fascist policies, and to take the best of what you can get out of the Democratic Party and then try to sway Biden and Harris leftwards. And so I think that there's going to be a big move. There's been a big move in the past 2 weeks around voter registration and to get people to make sure that they're registered to vote. And I think that we can anticipate seeing the same kind of campaign to get people to turn out to vote on the 3rd of November or to vote by post.
And then let's talk about the coronavirus and its effects, specifically in the USA, when you look at the numbers and you look at how political rallies and even the US debate coming up in the next few days has been affected by this coronavirus. How will that play a role for Americans when they head to the polls in November?
Well, the coronavirus and the COVID crisis has become very politicized in the U.S., even though over 200,000 people have died from COVID-19. opinions around the danger of the disease, the best way to mitigate it, wearing masks, all those things, has become heavily politicized along party lines, Democrat and Republican. And those people who are supporters of President Donald Trump and are supporters of the way in which he has handled the COVID-19 crisis are not going to be swayed differently, even though the bodies, are piling up in terms of people who have died of the virus. Of course, the Democrats are in the opposing position. So I think that what we can expect is that the coronavirus is really just making people more entrenched and more divided along party lines. And there is nothing really that's going to sway people from the position that they hold currently by the election time in relation to the virus, because it really has become very starkly entrenched along party lines.
We'll leave it right there. Dr. Sithembile Mbete, thank you so much for your time. Dr. Sithembile Mbete is a lecturer in the Department of Political Sciences at the University of Pretoria. And she was joining us to give us an overview of what we can expect as the USA election 2020 heats up. President Donald Trump faces presidential hopeful Joe Biden. As we mentioned earlier, the debates kick off on Wednesday, Tuesday being USA time.